ping, ping, and all these little sparks of energy. Look at that. Canada, in Latvia, people. No surprise.
Spain, South Africa. Yeah, I'm from Chicago, and usually I'm facing the other way. Today I decided to face this way because I cannot stand looking at all the snow and cold outside. It's very depressing. Anyway. All right, we are live on YouTube as well. Great.
Yes.
All right. We are at the starting time, so we will get started. Most likely others will join as the webinar goes on. But for now, hello, everyone. This is super exciting because it's a new year, a new series, a reborn series. So normally on this fourth Wednesday of the month, we have our learner webinar, which has been open to our current learners and alumni. And that webinar usually was run by Cindy and focused on coaching competencies. And it was great, but we decided that, you know what, we have so many great coaches around the world in our network and outside our network. And the topics that we cover in all webinars are so useful to a broad number of people that we decided to rebirth this webinar. So it's no longer the learner webinar. It's now our Mastery in Leadership webinar, where every month we will have a different master coach, like today's guest. And that master coach is going to talk about whatever they are an expert in and tie it back to specific coaching competencies, so that we're all actively learning, but also broadening our horizons and listening and learning from coaches who have been doing this for a while and have something great to impart on us. So I'm very excited about today's first session, which Cindy will introduce. And in general, when you come back to this fourth Wednesday of the month webinar, you will see Cindy running the show. She's the one putting together the topics, the speakers. She's the mastermind. So thank you. Big, huge thank you to Cindy and to today's speaker, as well as to all the speakers we're going to have in upcoming months. So I'll hand it over to Cindy for introductions. But just in case some of you run off at the end of the webinar, there is a CCEU available for this webinar, a Core Competency CCEU. I will put the link and the password to claim at the end of this session, and you must claim within the next 7 days if you want the CCEU. And the second thing I want to mention is next week we are restarting our Business of Coaching series. We took a break this last month because there was New Year's Day on that Wednesday. But we will be focusing on what we're doing right now: video meetings, remote meetings, working remotely, coaching remotely. So we will have someone who does a lot of work in that space. So please join us the first Wednesday of the month, same time, different registration link, different topic, but you'll probably see me again. So I'm going away to the background. Cindy, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, and very happy 2020 to all of you. So as Marcus spoke about the new evolved webinars that we are now running for 2020, taking the place of the learner webinar, which is Mastering Leadership Through Coaching Competencies. And it is a core competency webinar. All speakers in the series will be master coaches, and you will gain core competency points for these webinars. And I just want to say something about the speaker. Svea and I know each other for a few years now. And in our communication on different platforms, as in mentoring, board members, training, whenever we spoke about ethics and professional standards, the conversations always evolved into what seemed to be a partnered approach, meaning what is emerging right now and how are we managing what is emerging, which sometimes we coach wonder, are we breaking ethics? And how would we know that? How do we know where that boundary is? the more we spoke, the more I was attracted to Swea's way of how she spoke about the topic. There was no, it should be that, or it must be that, but more an exploration of the topic to see how it was showing up for both coach and client, or different stakeholders in process. And I hope you get that kind of experience and much more from today's conversation. And I hope you partner with the speaker and the topic so that you get the most out of it. Without much more, I'd love to introduce you to you, my colleague from South Africa and a board member and an excellent mentor coach, psychologist, therapist, adult education specialist, and so much more. Svea van Dion.
Thank you, Cindy. I heard Magda say about that the invitation is because we have expertise in something, and I sort of thought, oh, what is it that I'm bringing to this? But that's expertise. And then I knew immediately, and I thought to myself, if I want to claim anything for today, I thought I'd like to claim the expertise of persistence in the face of uncertainty, which I think is perhaps what this session is going to be, I hope, encouraging people, is to get easy with uncertainty, which is different from confusion. And so, but thank you for your kind words about all of this. I think what I would like to ask the participants to do, because I'm aware that we're on a webinar where I can see you in the chat, but I can't see you as little video screens. But I'd like to encourage participants is that please could you use the chat as a way to log what it is you might like to say, hear more about, because I can see what you've put in the chat, but so can everyone else. And what I'm proposing to do is to say something to frame our webinar so that we've got some sort of shared way of working. So I'm not going to start in true coaching style with something like, so what are your best hopes for today, or what brought you here today, or etc. I'm going to really start more, I suppose, in a webinar kind of way, which is to say something about what you might be able to sort of expect to get, and then we'll work from there as we move along. I'm going to share my screen a bit. I hope not to kill you with PowerPoint, because I'm not a great PowerPoint person, but I do think there's a place for PowerPoint when we are in an international community. So just to locate myself geographically, because I think we aren't just minds that sit on webinars, we're actually bodies that are located somewhere. I'm in South Africa, in Cape Town. It's extremely windy. I can see out of my window a lot of trees waving and carrying on. And I have worked elsewhere and lived elsewhere, but I do regard myself as somebody who is an Africa located person. So what I'll do right now is share my screen so that you can also get a little bit of a sense of where are we and where are we going to go. And Cindy, if you could just hang in there with me and tell me whether people are seeing, whether you're seeing my screen, or if you're not, just let me know, because I'm working on two screens and, you know, the techno things, and sometimes we can get in front of ourselves. Okay, so our topic for today that we chose was mental health in the workplace. And I have a real interest in that, as I think probably all coaches do. And I've put on the slide probably some of the thing that I think already ICF alerts us to, is that the challenge of working ethically will mean that we inevitably encounter situations that require responses to unexpected issues, to do resolution of dilemmas. And I want to say something specific about a dilemma, is that a dilemma is something which initially we approach thinking, oh, there are multiple possibilities and none of these possibilities are actually going to be satisfactory. I just want to, okay, Magda, I'm going to try and do presentation mode, but it may not work well for me. So let me try it. Just bear with me for a sec. Okay, the difficulty
Looks
for
great.
me now, yeah, the problem is I lose the chat, so I can't see my chat then, so we'll just have to bear with that.
That's okay. Cindy and I will interrupt you if we need to.
Cool. Okay, you do that. You can see I'm like a chameleon. I like to see what's going on in the chat whilst also talking about what I can see on my screen. But I shall take my own medicine and live with uncertainty. What I'm proposing to do is to look at this issue of workplace mental health in the workplace and frame it as a conundrum rather than a dilemma. In other words, a conundrum is that there are different options, but they may not be unpalatable, whereas a dilemma really implies that whatever possibilities you see before you with your coaching clients, with leaders that you work with, or that people in the workplace see, they kind of think none of these are really things I want to be doing. So I think I'd rather bring it back to a conundrum, is that there are multiple possibilities and that we have much choice, which I think is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm going to draw on the ICF definition of coaching, as you can see, the revised 2019 Code of Ethics, and then the updated Core Competency Model, because I thought, why not? It's a new year. Those of us who are already credentialed have been encouraged recently by a flyer that's just gone out. You may have received it already, saying, go for it. If you're already credentialed coach, begin to use the new core competencies. If you're a training school and a trainee, be assured that if you stick with the old core competency, or I don't know what it's really called, they're not updated, whatever that might be, the existing, the original, you're fine. So I thought, let's just have a quick look at some of that. Okay, whoops. There we go. So I want to just alert you to where was something about myself, because that might give you a bit of context, is that I'm an educational psychologist. And I think that that's an important distinction for me, and not a clinical or counseling psychologist. Why? I am curious about how we learn, what we can learn, how we can learn things, how we can apply what we learn. I'm less curious about putting things into diagnostic categories. I'm less curious about treatments that allegedly work for certain conditions. So I don't want to make a statement about a definition of clinical or counseling psychology or organizational psychology, but rather just alert you to the fact that from an educational psychology perspective, which is what I originally came to coaching from, I'm really interested in learning. And you can see that one of the people that I think is really worth exploring is David Bode. He's an Australian. He's an adult learning theorist, and he made this astonishing statement at the first experiential learning conference that was ever held, where he said, adults do not learn by experience. And then he did what a lot of good coaches do, which is pause. And people went, what? And he went on and he said, they learn by reflecting on their experience. So adults do not learn by experience. They learn by reflecting on their experience. And I would add to that, and making decisions about how to act in the world. So I think this topic lends itself to that. One of the things that is part of my story is that I worked in a labor law institution, which is a place where people can bring unfair dismissal disputes. And it was a right. It was not a privilege. It was a right to be able to do that in South Africa. From 1996, we had a statute which changed quite dramatically. And the story that I want to tell about this in relation to this mental health issue is that I had an HR officer who was desperately concerned that there were a number of people, this was in 1996, employees who were saying, I'm really, really worried. I feel embarrassed, but I'm really worried to say this, but I'm really, really worried, says the employee to the HR person confidentially, that there could be people in this workplace who are HIV positive, and I'm not happy about that. We don't know this. They should be required to declare this, their status. And the HR officer brought this to me with a very worried look on her face. I'll show you a few very worried looking faces. There they come. And she said to me, she brought this dilemma, and it was a dilemma because she knew that we couldn't ask people to declare their status. Anyway, most people hadn't been tested and didn't know their status, besides which it was against the law, etc., etc., etc. And I remember thinking about this and talking with my management team a little bit. So that was interesting about the partnering aspect. And then going home, and it was a real dilemma still, because all the things that had come up, I thought, no, 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 no. And when I was driving and looking at a beautiful view, which is often the way I think that our complex minds work best, I thought, you know what? how would we run the workplace if we assumed that everyone was HIV positive and we had a duty to make everyone safe at work? And I think the mental health question is a bit like that as well. Instead of trying to diagnose, are people mentally well or not? And if they aren't, then, you know, what's wrong with them, is to actually think to yourself, how would we treat people if we regarded everyone as having the capacity to be mentally healthy, as well as the possibility that sometimes they might actually have mental health issues that they were facing? And how would we then conduct ourselves? My third thing is about academic researcher and part of map and territory. For those of you interested in this, I think the world of ideas is cheap as chips, as we say in South Africa. It's easy peasy to engage with maps, these wonderful conceptual frameworks and etc. But the territory, as in the everyday, how does that look on a Wednesday afternoon? You know, that's a different question. So I think for me, that's what I'd like us to be able to do a little of exploring today. And then you can see there's some more about living systems thinking. That's something that I'm very interested in and it's what my PhD is in, is about the relationships between things. And Gregory Bateson, I always remember him as saying, I look at the stars in the sky above me at night, and I think to myself, how are they connected to the starfish in the pool at the sea at my feet? And this idea of we call things by certain names, and what is the connection between these things that share names like stars and starfish? I then will draw on, and I'd really like to encourage all of us to look at Margaret Wheatley's work on willing to be disturbed. She came up with something very interesting on leadership, as did Derek Sivers, and I'll come to that in a minute. And then the ICF, which we all share. I followed an ACTP training and still do that, training myself now. I've done the hard journey, and it is a hard journey. I can't say it was displeasurable, but it was tough to get an MCC credential. And I think that takes us into the world of complexity, diversity, and quality assurance. Okay, so I showed you the perplexed faces. I was very perplexed by this, that I'd been working as a psychologist for many years, including in England. I worked, in fact, on a closed mental health ward, a locked ward, as they call it, where people were considered to be seriously crazy by the public. And I heard people say, coaches work with people who are well, counselors, therapists, and psychologists work with people who have mental health issues. And I thought, really? That's not what I'm experiencing in the workplace. And I thought, is this a boundary issue? In other words, a territory issue. The psychologists, counselors, and therapists want to ring the fence. Anyone with a mental health issue is our client. And coaches, you can only work with people who are well. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and I thought, no, I don't think that's the question. I think it's actually the wrong focus. I think this is an ethical question, and it's a question more about scope of practice and remit, and more importantly, for me, it was a call for self-regulation in a world where we work with subtle signals of uncertainty. So that's what I'm hoping we can explore. And I think, why is it even important to do all of this? Is because I have no idea in the country that you're in, but perhaps you'd like to see and have a look at some of your own figures and stats, is that in South Africa, we have an estimate from a very good research study that 30% of adults will have suffered from some form of mental disorder that's diagnosable in their lifetime, and all of them will have probably been in the workplace. The media gives us lots of views of what mental illness looks like. There's an explosion, and that's what all of our coaching clients have access to as well. And that even at a world level, you can see that the stats are not at 30%, but they're 18 to 36%, because there's such a variance of how this is all defined. So my question at this moment is, I'd like to stop my screen share and just say, what is your lived experience? To what extent do you as a coach experience, I work with only well people, someone else deals with people who have some kind of mental unwellness, or actually no, it's more blurred? So maybe if you can just type into the chat, it's distinct or it's blurred, or any other comment that you'd like to make. And I'm going to stop my share for a moment so that I can see the chat. Oops, where is it? There we go. Let's have a look. What's coming up in the chat? Blurred. It's totally blurred. Okay. Then you need special lenses. Okay, I don't think we know. It's blurred, 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 but not unclear or confusing. Ah, that's interesting comment. It's blurred, but not unclear or confusing. Almost always blurred. Okay, mostly blurred. Okay, I'm a headhunter. Okay, that's interesting. The person who's put in the headhunter will come to a statement that's coach's experience. Okay, very nice comment as well. 1750, which is my time, is Daniel Russell. I work with people who may have mental health issues, but I don't provide mental health services. So there's already a beginning of a distinction. Okay. Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you for some ideas and thoughts. Okay, and there's a very strong statement also just come through about the reality is that any of our clients, whether we counselors, coaches, any of our people, our friends in life may be at risk of suicide, and that's not something, I think that's a whole topic on its own. It is something though that people are often very afraid of. Okay, then the problem is in some cultures it's taboo, and so nobody talks about it, so how can you even answer the question? Okay, cool. Cindy, anything that I've missed that you want to pick up on from the chat?
Nope, I think you covered most of it.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Then, oopsie. Okay, let me just, okay, I'm doing quite a little bit of techno dancing here, but it's fine. We'll be okay. All right, so let's leave the world of mental health, etc., for a minute and go to leadership, because the location of this webinar is in leadership. All right, so now let me put myself onto slide view. Okay. This may or may not sit well with some of you. So if it sits unwell with you, please keep with your own point of view. Don't feel any pressure to adopt mine. I do say to people sometimes, while I'm passionate about things, I'm not evangelical. So I'm very, very happy for people to have their own points of view. But when I think about leadership, I think about there are gazillions of textbooks, video clips, theories, models, and they all claim that they're either right or they're significant. And so it's a huge dilemma, I think, to engage with the topic of leadership and what does that mean, because it will mean so many different things to different people, and it will be contextually bound. So I would like to just flag those two people that I spoke about, and then to say something that you might like to take with you from this webinar and play around with yourselves. Is Margaret Wheatley is someone who I facilitated a course for. She's got a great website with a lot of downloadable material, but I've chosen to just put a YouTube clip instead that you might like to have a look at, called this thing called willing to be disturbed. And she says one of the most important capacities for a leader is the willingness to be disturbed. She said the fact that you'll be disturbed if you're in a workplace is going to be part of being in a workplace, whether it's disturbance that someone parked in your parking place or disturbance that the person you recruited didn't turn out like you expected, or some or other disturbance. And disturbances can also be delightful, that someone remembers your birthday, who yesterday had a huge argument with you and put on, came with a really open heart and wished you a happy birthday. So this willing to be disturbed idea she talks about is very important. And she spoke about a leader is someone who steps up to serve when the community has a need. So she didn't go with things like situational leadership, various of the kind of servant leadership or host leadership, etc. Just made a simple thing of a lead. There needs to be a need, and there needs to be a collection of people who have an interest in this need being actually met, and it is a willingness. And then that's what led to her talking about willing to be disturbed. I would say that it's a short little, I think it's 2 pages, maybe 3. It's a PDF you can download as well, but there's a video. If you prefer watching videos, it's about 7 minutes. Where she outlines this importance of that the one thing we can bring when we work with people, whether we're coaches or leaders or both, is to actually have a willingness to be disturbed and to bring curiosity to that, but also to bring respect and dignity for the other person to that. So it's more a kind of how we approach it. And I think that's a very much supported by the ICF things that we're going to look at. There's Derek Sivers, who's got a wonderful little video clip, which I'd hope to show you, but I'm not sure if we're going to have time. So I'll probably just put it in the chat. He talks about this idea of a leader becomes a leader only when the first follower is welcomed by the leader and the first follower, and then a few more people begin to do something together, which creates a movement. But he says, until that moment, a leader is actually just a lone nut. It's somebody doing their thing, hoping that somebody else will be inspired by it. So it's a very irreverent but interesting point of view, and it's a lovely little video clip. So I'm going to stop my share just for a minute so that I can get into the chat. Oops, no, I don't want that. Oh dear. I think what I need are two, okay, I've got two screens going and they're jumping around a lot. I don't know why, it's just what they're doing today. So yeah, let me just grab this little activity that you might like to try yourselves at some point. There we go. The mnemonic game. I know that not everyone works in English, so let me say the mnemonic game is that thing where you take each letter out of leader and you play with it in order to try and remember how you spell it or say it or whatever. So I did a little job of my own where I thought, if we look at this leader word, I find it really nice and useful to talk with people about, if you were to put some words to L-E-A-D-E-R, what would you do? And then that we compare them with one another. So you might like to do this if you've got a group of colleagues or you want to just do it by yourself. We're not going to do it as part of an hour webinar, but it's the kind of thing that I often do in my training courses where we start looking at the meaning making. And I think in mental health work and leadership work, meaning making is everything. Is what do people mean together about what leadership is or isn't, or what coaching is or isn't. The metaphor game you can play on leadership. So I'm just going to read you quickly some of the things I just wrote quickly, and you might like, in fact, no, let me not read them out. I'm just going to grab them for you because that would be better. Let me just find them for you. There we go. This is an activity plus other skills. I mean, coaches, we make statements, but we ask lots of questions. So there's a bunch. Cynthia, have they popped up? Yeah, there we are. Okay, so you might want to do an activity about the ship in leadership. Okay, what does your ship look like if you're a leader? Where's your ship coming from? Where's your ship going to? What is the purpose of your ship's movement? Are you not seeing it, Cindy? In the chat? Okay, I'm seeing it, so it obviously hasn't popped in yours. Let me just look. I'll do it again. It's okay.
It's in the chat, Surya.
Yeah, it's popped now. Okay, now it might have popped about twice. So there's a bunch of questions. These are things that I would like to offer people about the leadership idea as to how you can be playful about something that people can get very earnest about without being playful for no purpose. Because I think there's a lot of adult entertainment that goes on in the world, but I don't mean to be an entertainer. I just think it's interesting for people to bring curiosity, to bring light energy. So there's some questions that you might like to explore. But what I would like to move to is what I think many of you are really here to have a look at, is how does this all work with ICF core competencies, with revised ethics, etc., etc. So I'm going to go back into my shared screen. Okay, there's an interesting comment in, okay, let me put it on. I hope we're in the right spot. Yeah, we are. Okay, so this mental health and mental illness in the context of coaching. One of the things that you might like to, ask yourselves is this question that I proposed, which is, if we say that we're interested in promoting mental health, why is our professional language, both in coaching and in psychology and in the public domain and in leadership, it's so impoverished. We have florid language about mental illness, wonderful words, lots of concepts, but very little. And if you look at the mental health definition from the World Health Organization, it talks about it as a state of well-being in which every individual can realize his or her own potential, can cope with normal stresses of life, whatever normal means, and that will be very context-bound, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. Now, when I ask myself this question, you know, what can I say about myself? I don't always feel that on every day of my existence, I can necessarily say something that is that positive about all of this. However, what I think is important is if you look at the definition of coaching from the ICF, which is familiar to all of you, I'm sure, but here it is, it's hidden. I have no understanding why it's so hard to find it. It sits in the frequently asked questions, and you have to scroll down quite far to find it. So if you, like me, originally searched for it, I eventually found it a couple of years ago, and I've now sort of bookmarked it, is have a look at it. It talks about coaching as a partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. So in some ways, coaching can be seen, this definition encourages us to think about that when we are coaching, we are actually promoting mental health, because the definition of mental health and the definition of coaching seem to have a very close purpose that they share. So I'd like to go back to participants and ask you, how many of you are in some way using the definition of coaching explicitly with your clients? Either to check, if we look together at this definition of coaching, how well does this fit with what you were anticipating or hoping for from coaching, or what you've had before in coaching, or which bits of this do you feel you would really like us to bring alive in the coaching, the thought-provoking or the creative process or the inspiring. So could we just go into the chat, and if you would like to just type anything that comes to mind about what it is that you use in the definition of coaching at the moment.
Svea, were you meant to share screen a few minutes ago?
Yeah.
On the definition.
I did put it up, but yeah, this is the difficulty. I can't see the chat.
Okay.
So I'm not seeing your messages in the chat. If you want me to know what's going on, you're going to have to talk to me.
Share your screen for a minute, please, on the definition of coaching.
I'll tell you what I'd rather do. I'm going to put it into the chat for people, because then it's there. I think that's better. Let me just grab it for you all. Okay. Oh, and I've got, yeah, because my, okay, this is what I was hoping wouldn't happen.
Svea, I just grabbed it from ICF website. I'll put it in the chat.
Have you done it? Okay, thank you. I just need to find my way back. There we go. Thank you, Magda. That's great. I'm going to put the short one here. There we go, as well. So there's the elaborated version and then there's the short version. And I'd like to just have a quick look at what people are writing about. Yes. Okay, great. So some people are actually using it. It's in the coaching agreement. That's wonderful. I would really, I think what I'd like to say about this as my contribution is, if you want to partner, I think what the definition of coaching does is, if you have it on a card or a piece of paper or whatever, we can talk with our clients about it, instead of it being a one-on-one between, is your idea of coaching or my idea of coaching the appropriate thing? And I know when I train and mentor coach people, I often hear them ask questions like, so what do you know about coaching? And I think, oh, tricky. It introduces the kind of power differential. Whereas if you say, you know, let's have a look at this together. You know, what strikes you about this? How does this match with what you were hoping for? How close is this to what you've experienced before if they've experienced coaching? You know, which bits of this would you like us to include? How's that relevant to mental health in the workplace and the conundrum? I think what it can also be used for is to ask people, how ready do you feel, or capable, or able, or interested, or any verb, because I think a lot of coaching is about the verbs, is to ask clients, how ready do you feel to embark on a conversation with me over a period of maybe a few sessions in which you and I will be doing things together that are thought-provoking. So you will be disturbed, which is why I spoke about the Margaret Wheatley idea. It may unsettle some of your current thinking. How attractive is that to you? Is that something you are hoping for? Is that something that is going to be manageable for you? And out of that begins to be a conversation where people may well reveal, not, I'm not well, but they may say, it's not a great time. I'm not feeling up for being very creative. I don't have much energy for being creative. So it helps us as coaches to not have to get into the diagnostic world of are you mentally well or not, but rather what is your position as a client in relation to what coaching is all about, and being able to have a discussion about that rather than, as I say, this kind of discussion about are you well or aren't you well. Okay, so I just want to check the chats. There's someone who says, I love the idea of discussion. Okay, so I think this is Mukesh Sharma. Please won't you at some point consider sending me an email or a WhatsApp. I'll put my contact details and tell me how did it go if you try this out. And anyone else who does experiments, I'm always very, very appreciative of hearing from people about any experiments that they run. Because they are experiments. And why I love experiments, you can hear my education interest coming out, is that experiments can never fail. Because even if an experiment goes differently from what you'd hoped for, you still learn. And that's quite a systems thinking idea as well, is that in order for us to learn about ourselves in the world, we need to try ourselves in the world and then see what the world gives us back as feedback. And so for clients, I think the notion of that coaching is a place in which you can perhaps design some experiments together with your coach, but then you will go out and try the experiment. And the experiment is not one that can fail because it will teach you something about yourself. We are not going to talk about CC8 from the original core competencies, creating awareness today, but I think it's one of the ways that we invite clients to create awareness is what did you learn when you went and tried it in the world? What do you now know that you didn't know before you tried this? And how does that then guide you in what you might like to do next? Okay, somebody said, okay, Magda, it was you, says, yes, and we'd love to share them more widely. I agree. Magda, there's probably a way that Coacharia already has a repository in which we can put all these good things. So maybe we can also hear that at the end, is where could people go on the Coacharia website to put in experiments which they'd like to share on the platform. So that would be great to hear more about that as well. Okay, so I hope the connections between this mental health story and how coaches can come with quite a different approach is starting to bubble for people. And I'd like to go to something which I discovered and which is part of what created my perplexedness. And you may have come across some of this as well. I'm going to share my screen. And then I'm going to do what Magda asked me to do, which is put it on screen share. There we go. Okay. These are some coaching presuppositions. And I think from an MCC point of view, that is something that we become very interested in, is in the things we say and the things we don't say and how we say them with clients. What are the presuppositions or assumptions that are actually embedded in some of that? Because meaning making is not just about the words we say and the how we say it and the gestures we use and the facial expressions, but it's also about what the client is making of what we are saying and not saying. Okay, so there was this thing about...
Sorry to interrupt. Your screen is not showing.
It's not. Okay.
Nope.
All right.
We can still see you, so it's great, but not your screen.
No. That's not, I mean, look, thank you for that kindness, but all right, let me try again. Tell me now.
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Well, hold on, we can see your screen, but we can see you and Cindy on it. So you need to click on your presentation.
Okay. And now?
Oh, still you.
Okay, wait. Let me do this a different way. Okay. Now you can see me, yeah?
Now we can see you.
Okay.
Before it was perfect. I'm not sure what happened this last time.
I know. And
Oh,
now?
great. You're back. Yep. If you click present, we should be good.
I know, and the difficulty is when I do that, everything goes wild. So let's try. Maybe it'll listen to you, Magda. Tell it to behave.
Yep,
Yes?
it's listening.
Great. The power of partnering. Okay. All right. So this coaching presuppositions, this was some that were put to coaches, maybe not in the entire world, but certainly in the English speaking textbook world, that coaches deal with the suffering functional people who are in some way suffering. Okay. And sometimes they deal with the suffering dysfunctional. So people like who get referred for things like this person's way of speaking in the workplace is like creating suffering for team members. Can you please coach them to improve their way of communication? But that what we didn't deal with is the mentally ill. So there was this funny thing about the suffering functional. In other words, I'd really, really, really like to get this promotion and I don't know how to do that. Can you coach me so that I'm better prepared? Is an example of, at the moment, I'm suffering, but I'm functional. I'm looking for a promotion and I'm up for it, but I'm suffering because I don't know how to do it. This was quite a common view. Now, the difficulty with this is that if you go with something like this, it sounds very, it sounds cool. You put people into 3 baskets and you only coach the first lot. And maybe you do the second lot if you're feeling brave or you're needing income or whatever, and you don't do the 3rd basket. But the problem is that it then raised this one author, Buckley, they brought up, this Bagla says, okay, well, if that's the case, then at minimum, every executive who you're going to coach should first have a psychological evaluation. Now, from a leadership point of view, and when I said I was a senior manager and my HR officer, I gave you that example, that's a huge problem. Because if you do a psychological evaluation for coaching purposes, the dilemma is what happens if you discover that a leader or a team leader or a manager comes up with a psychological profile that says that they're actually unsuitable to lead people. They shouldn't be let loose on people, but they're there, they're an employee. And you can't fire them for those, well, not in South Africa, you can't fire people for those kinds of reasons. So it led, although it seems on the surface like, oh, that's a good idea, we'll just evaluate, we'll do an assessment and that'll tell us whether people are mentally well or not. It really doesn't work like that. The other thing that I want to raise is, because I'm a systemic thinker, functioning is very contextual. So the kind of screaming and shouting that happens on a sports field is completely fine. But if you were to do that in the workplace, in some workplaces, that would really not go down well. In some workplaces, the kind of quiet reverence that people might bring to meditation or to being in a spiritual environment would be considered completely inappropriate. It's like, come on, give me your ideas. Why are you being so quiet? So I would like to just sort of say to you that I'm a social constructionist by sort of background and by choice. And I find it very difficult, a lot of the mental health literature, because it's not social constructionist at all. It's positivist type. In other words, it looks in a completely different philosophical way at the world. But I thought, let's not go there because that's a whole other webinar. And really, this is about, they were okay when we started, is something I hear a lot when I mentor, coach, and supervise coaches. They say, I can't believe it. This person was great when we started coaching. This team was great. And now, like, something's happened and they're completely different. So what I'd like to do is to move on to the ethics that we share and say something about that. Okay, I was very happy when I saw the revision, the 2015 revision, because I was teaching quite a bit of coaching ethics at the time. And I thought, this is a jump the curb leap. It's not just a little tweak. It was a code of ethics that ICF put out that went from the more common in many professions of no, don't do mostly. And it actually increased the aspirational quality. It offered coaches the possibility to aspire to be and do in certain ways. So not just to do things, but to be in certain ways. Now, I think the 2019 revision is definitely continuing that focus on how to show up as a professional coach. So the beingness of coaching and not just the doingness of coaching. I think it goes even further on partnering, and it encourages discernment rather than judgment. In other words, is take the signals that you're getting from clients where you're not sure about their thinking, their consciousness, their discernment, their own ability to make judgments in the world. Take that seriously, but don't move to judgment. Maintain dignity for yourself and others, respect, and in other words, build your trustworthiness perhaps out of some of those things. So I really feel very encouraged that ICF has a code of ethics, which I don't think is so for all organizations. And it really does give us a lot to work with, is this feeling of being aspirational. We may not always get it right, but in fact, it may well serve us very well. I'd like to move to the core competencies, the 2 that we flagged for this webinar, and spend the rest of our time together on that. So I'm going to stop my share for a moment and just check in with you. Is there anyone who would like to say anything or can offer us anything to share about how you're using the code of ethics in a way to help you with having a partnering attitude or approach to when people show signs of perhaps mental health uncertainty that you're unsure about, even if you don't exactly know what that is. Magda, there's someone who might like to speak?
I don't know, but she raised her hand. Doreen, in case you're listening, you're allowed to talk. So if anybody else wants to chat, please raise your hand.
Okay, being transparent. Any other comments? Not yet, still listening. Okay, cool. Oh. Okay, I love this. Somebody wants me to define mentally ill. Okay, you're bumping up against somebody who generally says, I would rather talk about, as coaches, we need to be willing to engage with a mentally healthy definition. And again, share that if need be with clients, or if we want to, is to ask, say you're going to coach in an organization. I always ask leaders, do you have any policy here which has anything to do with what is expected of people in terms of how they need to turn up at work, around whether it's mental health, whether it's to do with substance use, etc. Are there any policies in this organization? If there are, I ask them, and what is your expectation of me as a coach? Because I don't take that on. I ask them, who are the group of people that I would need to talk to? Is it you? Is it HR? Who would I need to consult with and partner with if I become concerned? Who do your employees get encouraged to talk with? So that expansiveness of sorting out confidentiality, which is what we're going to have a look at now, I think is very important. So I'm going to be disappointing to, who was it you asked about? It was Pradeep. Yeah. We could, I'm happy to point you to some if you need them. Okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I won't be like that, because people always hate it when they say one thing about psychologists. We always answer a question with a question, so I try not to do that. And then also when people ask for somebody, you go, no, you shouldn't want that, which is not what I'm saying. I think what I'd like to do is share something that the ICF has created, which may answer your question, but in a slightly different way. So let me do that. Let me just find it. Okay, so now I want to screen share, and I need this. And Magda and Cindy, will you please tell me if it pops up correctly or wrongly?
Right now we are seeing your whole presentation with your presenter notes. So you might want to click exit show first, unless you're trying to stay in there.
No, oh, I shouldn't have done that, Magda. That was a mistake. Okay.
We can still see your notes.
I know you can. Just hold on. Okay, I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something safer. All right, I'm going to go there to, just let me go. In fact, I'm going to go there. And let me see. Do you now see it full?
Now we see still with presenter notes.
I don't know why on my side it's not showing like that. Can you bear with me, or is it too small?
It's a little small. Do you see? Yeah, exit show. There we go. Now we see you.
Yeah, we'll start again. The problem
By the way,
is,
Saya, we can share the slides on our blog later. So if you
yeah,
have
but I
links
wanted
and
to
things.
show, I
Okay.
want to show, okay, look, let's go with whatever you're seeing. I hope you're seeing something about a resource for referral. Are you seeing that or not?
Yes, we are.
Okay, with notes or not, there we go. Let me just say that under the new core competency demonstrates ethical practice. Number 7 says refers clients to other support professionals as appropriate. I'm not sure if everyone's aware that there has been this PDF put out on the 10 top indicators to refer a client to mental health professional. You can download it from the ICF website. I think it's very useful. And I think that it might answer that question about what is mentally ill, because I think when coaches know what are the top 10 indicators that ICF would encourage us to pay attention to and then discuss with clients in order to make some partner decisions about, in the light of these things, what would be the best way to proceed. I think that may be a much better way of working than to work with what is the definition of mental illness that comes from psychiatry, psychology, mental health, social work, etc., etc. So Magda, that might be a nice resource, to put that in as well for people to get that if they don't already know. It's fairly new.
Yep, I'll get it.
And the thing that I like most about it is that, however, it's really about this here, that the client should be presenting as a whole, competent and capable person. And if you are not experiencing that, and they are saying that they do not experience that, that may be an interesting time to say to somebody, could we have a look together at this PDF about whether these 10 things are things that you're experiencing, and then let's talk together further about what may be a good source of support that you may like to access, and find out more about what they might like to access. Okay, so I hope that that goes some way to an answer to this question about what is mental illness. I think for me that feels like a more useful answer. Then I'm just also keeping an eye on our time together. And okay, what I'd like to offer people is something which I think is more interesting and useful in the webinar than a lot of information, is if you have a look at this, I'm going to hope that I'm going to get it right. Magda, I'm sorry I'm being so delinquent or whatever. So not cool. It's usually not the case, but today it is. There we go. Cindy, Magda, are you seeing ladder of inference?
Yes, we're seeing it.
Cool. Okay. Here is something which I think is very much about the core competencies and how we might be able to execute them, is that there's this little thing called the ladder of inference, which some of you may know. It comes from Peter Senge's work, organizational work. And the problem is that mostly we take action up here. I take action on my beliefs. And my beliefs arrive from my conclusions, and my conclusions come from the assumptions I make, and the assumptions come from the meanings that I've created, which are also cultural and personal and also knowledge-based. And they come from the data that I've selected. So if you keep going down, and then you get to observable data and experiences, or noticing, which is why I put this word here, is that I think the core competencies really encourage us to spend more of our time in noticing and being able to get really good as coaches at describing what I notice. So I'll give a simple example. Instead of saying to somebody, I see you're anxious, all right, which is at least a meaning making, if not already a conclusion up there, is if we say to them down here at a noticing level, I notice that as you speak about your boss, you tap your leg very sharply and your body twitched. Did you notice that? First ask them, did you notice that? Because if they didn't notice it, then they're at a disadvantage. If they say, yes, I am actually noticing it, or I know I do that, is to then ask, what does that tell you? So I think coaching is particularly useful at exploring with people at a noticing level what probably a psychologist or someone who's doing diagnostics would be dealing with, also at a noticing level, but more at the meaning, assumptions, conclusions level. And this little saying, I think, is very helpful to us. There's nothing so wrong with people or us that what's right with us can't fix. And I think that coaching might be very useful to assume that clients have the capacity to notice things about themselves, and they have the capacity to, when we come with core competency work of the kind that I think we're encouraged to do by the ICF, that they can actually make good decisions. Because what I'd like to remind us all about is that unless someone is in an institution, like as in a mental hospital or a clinic or whatever, they are in life doing their life, whether they've got a diagnosis or not. So whether they've got bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or whatever the diagnosis might be, if they're in the workplace with you, they are trying their best to get on with doing life as best they can. And maybe we should respect that. So I want to just go back to this core competency 2, which is about embodies a coaching mindset. And simply say that I think there is a lot here that gives us guidance about how to cope when we begin to pick up at a noticing level things about our clients which tell us that there may be a difficulty at a mental health level. And they would be things like fatigue, inability to engage in a conversation. And when I say fatigue, the kind of fatigue where clients say, I leave here absolutely clear about what I'm going to do. But by the time I get out and I'm back in my workplace, I don't know, something just happens to me. I just can't do it. I want to, but I just can't. So it's not the same as excuse making. It's actually about the person expressing the inability to follow through with things. That kind of fatigue is very interesting and should be interesting to coaches to ask some of these questions. This number 5, I think, is very important. Uses awareness of self and one's intuition to benefit clients. So the noticing capability that I referred to and the core competencies actually encourage us to offer what we are aware of, but to do it in a way that is beneficial to clients. And that's why I think the noticing and being low on the ladder of inference is such a useful skill, rather than a conclusion or a belief, which is what I think a lot of coaches have been encouraged to get into in the world of mental health, is that they need to get good at concluding, is this person depressed? Concluding, has this person got a mental health problem? Instead of staying in the world of what do I notice is happening between me and the other person. Okay, Magda, I know that we are reaching our time when we need to allow people to step out. So I think what I'd like to do is stop my share and let you do what you need to do. And then say to people, if there are any people who can stay on and want to still ask some questions, I'm happy to stay for another, a few minutes. I can do that. I can do that for 10 minutes. But would you like to go ahead? Because you need to do various things about the
Sure.
CCUs, etc.
Okay? Yeah, that sounds great. So everyone who wants to stay, please stay. Otherwise, I will put the link to the CCU right now. And the password is all of the above. For those of you who have come to these before, there's usually a story. Since we're talking about mental health today and the workplace, I work from home. My dog is with me, for example. This is my workplace, so my mental health needs to be good everywhere. And yesterday, my dad came in as I was having my coffee, and he just started trying to fix and change everything. And I was just like, oh my Lord, how am I going to get through this day? Dad, I love you, but sit down. Anyway, so when you go to claim your CCEU, the question refers to all the crazy things my dad tried to do before 8 a.m., before coffee. And the answer is all of the above. I hope you find it humorous. So link is in the chat. Back to you.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm going to just wait to see if there's anything, and I'm going to need some help because I've again lost my chat. Oh, this is awful.
Svea, can I interrupt for a minute?
Yeah, please.
Would you give out your details just so that if anybody wants to contact you
Yeah.
with a question or something, they can do so?
Cindy, I would like to do that, but I'm not able to get back into the chat for some reason. I don't know why.
It's okay. I will email everyone
you do?
who's attended.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
So don't worry about it.
Okay. Brilliant. All right. I mean, look, I would then perhaps, if I can't, I'm not able to see the chat. I'm sorry. I have not done a good job technically. I would like to invite everyone, those of you who are still here, is to really explore with your clients, if nothing else, is I would be grateful if you would do whatever you can to work in a partnering way with clients and to bring the same curiosity that you do to the conversations about when they talk about, you know, I'm a pilot, and they go, you know, I have a borderline disorder diagnosis, is to bring the same curiosity that you would bring to a statement of, you know, I'm a pilot. I think it's important that you know that. Bring the same level of curiosity to that, because in fact, what the person is simply doing is giving you something with which to connect with them and partner with them. It may be a statement that they want you to engage with per se, but it may not be. It may simply be something that they feel a duty to offer you as their coach. Cindy, are there any things in the chat that you're seeing that you would like us still to pick up on?
Yeah, when somebody's asking a question about how to deal with a difficult employee, but there's no context there, and I don't know whether you have time to question or to ask some questions around more context. Yeah, that would be a difficult one.
Maybe a good thing is, if the person's still around, is to just write, rather than all the context, is just say how to deal with a difficult employee. I think what I'd like to offer you, and then you can write if that's at all useful, and if not, we can elaborate, is if you think about a difficult employee as being the employee is difficult, rather than there is a difficulty between me and the employee about how we are trying to talk to one another. I think that coaching is particularly brilliant at having an interactional view, and to see the difficulty as lying, I have not yet found a way to engage with this person in a way that they can respond to me and we can partner. So I think you're talking about how do I partner with people where I need to adjust myself in order to find a way for them to be able to talk with me, rather than it's a difficult person and inside this person is a trouble. Yes, I know that people do feel difficult, and we talk about difficult people, but I think from a coaching perspective, I think it's more useful to ask yourself, or ask myself, how can I self-regulate and offer a different way? Perhaps if I ask them to write something down, perhaps if we change the location of where we're talking, but to invite them to say, I would like us to be able to have a conversation. How do we need to go about creating the conditions for that to happen? Cindy, is there anything in the chat further?
I would like you to clarify a question.
Sure.
Or just share some insights, share your own insights around how would you define ethics?
I love the way you ask a question at 3 minutes after that. You mean a definition that you can write on a postage stamp or so? I think for me, what ethics is about, all right, is this idea about what I'm probably alluded to, is bringing respect, dignity, to conversations, to actions, and the willingness to hold multiple perspectives, other people's points of view, rather than standing on ceremony with your own. And the thing I think about ethics is that ethics are also culturally, but also globally recognizable. There's something about ethics which has to do with humanity, and bringing humanity to the work that we do. And the willingness, though, to deal with this unexpectedness, this disturbance that we have. So, Cindy, I'm not sure if I can do any justice to a big question like this in the time that we've got, but I hope that gives a flavor.
Yeah, that was great, Svea. I asked because so many coaches speak or use language that comes across as if ethics is cast in stone.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, ethical guidelines, I think, are offered as a way for us to have something to engage with. So maybe I'll finish with a small thing, which is about, there's a wonderful Italian saying, which is, why must there always be a gherkin in any bowl of olives? And the answer is because otherwise, how will the olives know they're olives? And so I feel like the codes of ethics offer us an opportunity to go, what does the code of ethics tell me? And what do the core competencies tell me about how to be and show up and do? And what am I experiencing in my own self about what I would like to be able to do, or what I'm thinking I need to do, or how I need to be? So it offers you a private space in a way in which to have a thinking partner, if you want to call it that. So I think it's very much a co-creative enterprise ethics. I don't think it's at all, it's not about legal, and even legal is about interpretation. It's not about being literal. It's about being metaphoric and figurative, and at the same time being held to account.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that most of the coaches have still stayed on. And I know that you probably want to close, so I'll be quiet and you can close.
All right. Well, I would like to say a very big thank you. The process has helped me. This invitation helped me go through a lot of material. There was plenty more that I would have liked to have shared with people. It is something that's on my agenda for doing training courses and webinars and things like that. So I would, and I do mean that definitely, is that I would very much appreciate being part of anyone who would like to email me, or I'll look in the Coach Saria space as well and respond. Is I think that we are all in a massive learning journey of how to work well with people in a world where people are just people. They come with mental health, mental illness, and something in between. And our job is to try and engage with them as best we can, while at the same time not attempting to offer a service which is beyond what our scope of practice allows us to do. And I would really like to wish everyone well. And thank you so much for this opportunity. And Magda too.
Thank you, Svea. It was a pleasure partnering with you and everyone. Magda?
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, thank you so much, Svea.
All right.
And for everyone who's registered for this webinar, it is a series. We will have another amazing session with another MCC coach 1 month from now. So when you registered for this webinar, you register for the whole series. Of course, we hope that you attend as many as you want, but just so you know, as with many things that we do at Coach Aria, it's flexible based on your time and your interests. So please join us here next month and next week and the week after. There's something on every single week. Please join our live streaming on YouTube, which we will do for every webinar that we do. And please take a look at our YouTube channel for past webinars, and on our blog for the slides from past webinars if you're going to, watch any of them. But I hope to see you here again. And thank you so much to Cindy as well for organizing this. This was a great way to kick off the new year. I learned a lot.
Thanks, Magda. Can we say school is out?
How?
School is never out.
All right, school is on pause.
Fine. For me, it's morning, so school's just beginning.
Bye.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Thank you
Bye,
so much.
everyone.
Bye.